John chapter 8, it's right in the middle of Jesus' battle with the Pharisees. Jesus had an ongoing battle. It lasted about 3.5 years from the start of his ministry till they put him on the cross with the religious leaders of the day. And Jesus, a lot of the things he taught and a lot of the things he preached were directed at the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the religious leaders, and the Pharisees had taken the law that God had given the nation of Israel, and they twisted it all up and used the law to build their own kingdom. That would never happen today. Nobody would do that. That would try to take religion and build their kingdom out of it. But that's exactly what Jesus was a lot of his teaching was against and about. And he was forever warning the people. He says, beware of the Pharisees. And so right in the heat of all that battle, Jesus has a run-in with the Pharisees, and they just want to get rid of this guy. Yeah. They want everything to get back to normal. They want everything to get back to the way they had it before Jesus showed up. 3.5 years ago, Jesus shows up, and Jesus was the original chaos candidate. He was the original. He was the original monkey wrench in the scheme of things. The Pharisees had, and the nation of Israel sort of had an arrangement with Rome, and everything worked fine. Everybody was happy with that arrangement, except it wasn't working very well. And Jesus showed up, and he was like the monkey wrench into the works that just screwed the whole thing up. And just like today, they want to get rid of that monkey wrench. The Pharisees wanted to get rid of Jesus. They didn't really care. They just wanted him to go away. That would have been the best thing that would happen if he would just leave. If he would just go away, ride off into the sunset, as long as we don't have to hear from him again. They didn't necessarily want him to die. They didn't need him to be destroyed per se. They just needed him gone because he was messing up their works. He was messing up their kingdom. And so in the middle of that, they have a run-in with Jesus. They come out on the short end of it. And so they come up with this scheme. In John chapter 8, they decided to, Jesus shows up, and he's teaching in the temple. And in the middle of his teaching, in the middle of Jesus teaching the people, the Pharisees bring a woman to Jesus, and they bring her in and they plop her down in front of everybody, and they say, "We caught this woman in the very act of adultery." It says in verse, I'll just read the story. Jesus, at dawn, in verse 2, it says, "He appeared again in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group." I was reading that this week, and that phrase stuck out at me. They made her stand before the group. This woman was not there by her choice. She wasn't wanting to be there. She didn't choose to be in this situation. They brought her to Jesus. If you know the story, you know that in all probability, it was a setup from the get-go. They probably set this woman up. I'm guessing that she probably was a prostitute or a woman that had a reputation as being loose. Now, it was the strangest thing because they didn't bring the guy along. So I don't know if they thought, we caught this woman in adultery with herself, by herself, or I don't know what they thought the people would think. I think they didn't care what the people thought, because it didn't matter to them. The woman was not important. They thought they were the ones setting Jesus up. It goes on and explains, it says, they brought her because they wanted to trick Jesus. They were trying to trap Jesus. And they thought by bringing this woman and presenting this case to Jesus in front of an open court, in front of a crowd of people, that they could trap Jesus. So the woman was just a pawn in their game. She was not the main character. She didn't matter to them. They didn't care what happened to this woman. She wasn't important. She was a woman that they went out and found, probably trapped into a situation so that they could use her, because their objective was to get at Jesus. Their objective was to get rid of Jesus. But the woman is the person that we're going to focus on today, because it says she was not there of her own accord. She didn't choose to be there. They forced her to come, probably physically. They probably had a man on each arm and literally drugged this poor woman and threw her in front of a crowd of people, and then announced in a loud voice to Jesus and everybody, because they needed it to be a public spectacle. They needed it to be a public trial. And they said, "We caught this woman in adultery. And what are you going to do about it? What should we do about it?" And then they went on to recite the law and quote. I mean, can you imagine quoting the law to the lawgiver? Quoting the law to the person that was the embodiment of the law. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Yeah. And so they throw this woman in there, and the woman had to be petrified. She had to be scared. She had to feel like, this is the end of my life. This is the end of my reputation for sure. I'll never be able to hold my head up in town again. I'll never be able to walk out on the street. She probably was already almost there anyway. It was one of those deals where everybody knew what she was, but they tolerated it because it wasn't public. It was one of those things where she could walk down the street, and as long as she kept her head down and kept to herself, people would tolerate her and let her go. But she knew from this day on she would never be able to even do that anymore. Because what these Pharisees did was putting her in a position that her life would be forever changed. It was never going to go back to what it was before. This poor woman was caught in something that wasn't of her own making. She was there by somebody else's choice. And so they bring this woman, they throw her in front of Jesus, in front of the people, and Jesus has the most incredible reaction. He looks at all the men, they lay the trap. They say, "This is what the law says. And you've been talking about grace and forgiveness and mercy. So now what are you going to do? Because you claim to be a teacher of the law, and you claim to be the fulfillment of the law. The law says this woman's supposed to be stoned, but you've been teaching us about forgiveness and grace and mercy. So now what do you suppose we should do with this woman?" We don't even know the woman's name. That's important because the woman could have been me. The woman could have been you. The woman could have been us. Because we find ourselves in a position where we didn't choose to be. And it looks like a hard place. It looks like a place of disaster. This woman knew how precarious her position was. She knew that in any given moment, according to the law, somebody could actually pick up a stone and hit her in the head with it. She knew the Pharisees didn't care one way or the other. She didn't know what the people thought. She knew the people really didn't have much to say about it. They were going to pretty much follow whoever took the lead in this situation. If somebody would have picked up a stone and started throwing it at the woman, most of them probably would have picked up a stone and joined in. because they were the followers, not the leaders.
They were the sheep.
And so here she is. She doesn't know Jesus. She doesn't know who he is. She doesn't know what he is. He's an unknown in the situation for her. And she's finding herself in a position where she's completely at the mercy of whatever happens in this situation. Not by choice. So in the middle of all this drama and confrontation and everyone's like sort of holding their breath, waiting to see what's going to happen. What's going to come out of this situation? Is Jesus going to have an answer, or are the Pharisees going to have their way? Is this finally going to be the end of Jesus? Is this finally going to be the end of this upstart, this guy that has stepped in and created all this chaos, that has come out with a whole different way of living, a whole different view on who God is and what God is? Jesus was a revolutionary. He didn't go along with the system. In fact, the reason the Pharisees didn't like Jesus is because he threatened their system. He threatened their way of doing things. And so everybody's sitting there, and in the middle of all of this drama, Jesus does the most curious thing. He kneels down and begins to write in the dirt. Now, this story has always confused me, because I have always read this story, and probably like you, I have always wondered what did he write in the dirt?
I think he was writing all the sins of these Pharisees.
I
They saw, they said, uh-oh.
I disagree with you. I used to think that. Somebody said they think that he wrote, "Where's the man? Where's the man?" And I don't, I'm going to tell you straight up, I do not know what Jesus wrote.
We don't know.
We don't know. I also will tell you this, I don't think we're ever going to know. I don't think we're going to know when we get to heaven. I used to tell God when I'd read this story, I'd say, I can't wait to get to heaven, because one of the things I'm going to ask, I had a whole list of things that I'm going to ask God when I get to heaven. You know, why wasn't I taller? Why wasn't I, why don't I have more hair? Why, I got a whole list of questions I'm going to ask God when I get to heaven. This was one of them. What did you write in the dirt? What did you write? It's just a matter of curiosity. Well, when I was reading that this week, I started asking a different question. I started asking, why did you write in the dirt? Why did Jesus, in this place, in this time, kneel and begin to write in the dust? Now, for all we know, he was doodling. He might have been drawing pictures. He might have been playing tic-tac-toe with himself. We don't know what he was doing.
List.
What's that?
Grocery list.
Yeah, he might have been, we need fish, we need bread, we need, Yeah, we don't know. So so I started thinking, I thought, well, why did he do this? Why? And I think when I started to contemplate that, and I started to ask the Holy Spirit, why did he do it? I think I maybe got a little understanding of maybe what he wrote. Because I had a bit of a revelation that I never thought of when I read this story before. Everything that God ever did, he did through his word. He created the heavens and the earth. How? By speaking it. The spoken word. When he gave the law, when he gave the 10 Commandments, when he gave the law to Moses, how did he do it? He spoke it. He spoke it. Now I know he wrote it in the rock, and eventually it got written down. But if you look at the story in Exodus chapter 20, when Moses went up on the mountain, the very first thing it says, and God spoke this to Moses. It was a verbal thing. God spoke everything. Now in the day that we live in our culture, we sort of have this idea that if it's not written down, it's not permanent. In the heavenlies, if it hasn't been spoken, it's not permanent. So I believe what God wrote in the dust, he wrote it in the dust because he did not want to speak it, because he did not want it to be permanent. That's why I don't think what he wrote in the dust had anything to do with the Pharisees. I don't think it was written for them to read. I don't think it was written for them to see it and for it to have an effect on them. I think it's possible he was writing the sins of the woman, not the Pharisees. But I don't know. I think he wrote it in the dust because he wanted it erased. He wanted it to be gone. He didn't want that word recorded. He didn't want it as part of the story, because whatever it was he wrote wasn't going to matter. It doesn't have any bearing on what happened. Maybe he was just passing time. Maybe he was hoping the Pharisees would get bored and go away. But the Pharisees kept pestering him. They kept asking him the same question. So finally, it says in verse 7, when they kept on questioning him, he's down there writing in the dirt. Now imagine this story here. This woman who's in this situation, not because it's her choice. She was not there because she wanted to be. She was there by somebody else's choice. She was there because the Pharisees dragged her there. She didn't volunteer for this situation. The Pharisees think they've got a handle on and they've got the situation under control. They're like blasting Jesus. They're all gathered around and they're all shouting questions at him. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to stone this woman? Are we supposed to, I don't know, maybe they had rocks in their hands. Maybe they were ready to go to work. The tension was thick. Jesus is down on the ground just writing something. And we don't know what it is. And the whole time, they're like, and picture this, when he's down in that position, they're standing over him. It's a picture of their dominance over him. And they think, man, we're getting to him. We've got him running scared. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know what to do. We finally got him in a position where we got him trapped. They thought their plan was working. But finally, Jesus, it says, stood up. He straightened up. And he completely changed the whole thing in one sentence. I think when he stood up, he wiped out whatever he was writing. And he looked at him and he said, whoever's without sin, you throw the first stone. And with that one sentence, with that one spoken word, that's why I don't think it mattered what he wrote, because until he spoke, the words didn't matter. But when he spoke those words, when those spoken words went out, all of a sudden the situation changed. All of a sudden the Pharisees went from demanding answers and demanding that he answer their questions and demanding that he step up to their level. All of a sudden they realized he had completely flipped the situation and now he was in charge and they were the ones that were running scared. And it says one by one, starting with the oldest to the youngest, they walked away because they had no answer for that one question. That one answer, the one spoken word of God completely changed the situation. And the Pharisees trickled off one by one. While they were doing that, Jesus goes back down on his knee, starts writing in the dirt again. But look what happens, because this is the point I'm getting at today. All of this happened in front of Jesus, right? Who else was there that day? All of this happened in front of the people. All of this happened with the Pharisees' full knowledge. But who else knew what was going on?
God.
The woman, God. It was happening in the sight of heaven. It didn't take heaven by surprise. They weren't shocked. They weren't sitting up in heaven, or like God the Father wasn't watching Jesus and saying, oh my, I didn't see this coming. I didn't know they were going to do this today. I thought Jesus, my son, was just going to go teach and we were going to have some people healed and we were going to have a little bit of revival and everything was going to be fine. What are we going to do? No, it happened with heaven's full knowledge. Heaven knew this situation. Heaven knew it before the Pharisees knew it. Heaven knew what was going to happen before the Pharisees tricked the woman and trapped her and brought him to use her as bait to trap Jesus. So the question is, why did heaven allow this to happen? Why did heaven allow this poor woman to go through this incredibly disastrous situation, find herself in front of the town, in front of Jesus, in front of everybody, to have her life completely opened up and revealed and on the verge of destruction? The answer is, after Jesus looks up, he says, again he stooped down and wrote on the ground, and those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until, this is the part I love, until only Jesus was left with the woman. Only Jesus was left with the woman standing there. See, we watch the news and we see all this stuff going on around us and we think, oh no, it's a disaster. The Supreme Court rejected the Texas case. The Supreme Court did this. The lower court said this. The election officials didn't hear the case. They didn't decide the way we wanted to. The election didn't go the way we thought it should. Our country's in trouble. We're losing ground. The nation that we love is being destroyed. We're like that woman. It's not our choice. We find ourselves in a position where we'd rather be anywhere but here. Meanwhile, our God, who we pray to and seek and pray and fast and wake up in the middle of the night and pray, and we're doing all this, and sometimes it seems like God's not even answering. He's not doing anything. You don't think that woman would have given her eye teeth for God to show up and pull her out of there, to change the situation? She thought it was disastrous, but with one sentence, Jesus takes control of the situation, flips the switch. He turned the woman from a pawn into a queen. Remember a couple of weeks ago when we looked at the chessboard and I explained how Jesus is the ultimate chess player and he could change the pieces on the board? In this situation, just like that, the woman who was brought in as a pawn, who barely, nobody knows her name, all of a sudden she went from being a bit player to the main player. She went from having a bit part to having a starring role. Because all of a sudden, all of the accusers leave, the Pharisees' plan completely fell apart, and we get to the whole crux of the situation that heaven set up in the first place, and that was to get this woman to be alone with Jesus.